The Name 1, Part 2 of 4. You know as analysts the importance in every analysis of the subject's name. You should always pay attention to what your patient is called. This is never irrelevant. And if you ask for names in an analysis, it is definitely something that is much more important than the excuse that you may give to the patient, i.e. that all sorts of things can be hidden behind this kind of dissimulation or effacing that there may be of the name, concerning what is at stake for her, him, in her, his relationships with such and such another subject. That goes a lot further than that. You should sense it, if not know it. What is a proper noun? On this we should have a lot to say. The fact is that in effect we can relate a lot of material to the name. This material we analysts, even in supervision, thousands of times we will illustrate its importance. I don't think that we could, right here, give it all its full weight without. Here is yet another opportunity to reach out and touch the methodological necessity of it, without referring to what, in this area, the linguists have to say. Not in order to forcibly submit ourselves to it, but because in relation to the function, the definition in which this signifier that has its own distinctness, we should at least find a way of monitoring, if not a supplement, to what we have to say. Anyway, that is precisely the plan. In 1954, a little factum by Sir Alan H. Gardner came out. He has produced all kinds of works, and in particular a very good Egyptian grammar. I mean ancient Egyptian, hence he is an Egyptologist, but he is also, and above all else, a linguist. Gardner did, it was at about the time that I acquired it during a trip to London, a tiny little book called The Theory of Proper Names. He did it in a bit of a contingent way. He himself calls it a controversial essay in English. One could even say, which is an understatement, a polemical essay. He did it following the lively exasperation he had been brought to as a result of a certain number of statements by a philosopher that I am not mentioning for the first time, Bertrand Russell, of whom you know the enormous role he has played in the elaboration of what can be called today mathematized logic, or logicized mathematics. On the basis of Principia Mathematica with Whitehead, he gave us a general symbolism of logical and mathematical operations which one cannot not take into account once one enters into this field. Hence Russell, in one of his works, gives a particular definition that is totally paradoxical. Moreover, the paradox is a dimension that he is far from being loath to go into. On the contrary, he uses it more often than not. Hence, Mr. Russell has made certain remarks concerning the proper name that literally rendered Mr. Gardner beside himself. The quarrel is itself so significant that I believe I must draw you into it today and link in some remarks in relation to it that I feel are important. Which side do we start with? With Gardner or with Russell? Let's start with Russell. Russell takes up the position of a logician. The logician is a position that was not created yesterday. He operates a certain apparatus, to which he gives various headings, reason, thought. He discovers there a certain number of implicit laws. To begin with, these laws, he extricates them. These are the ones without which nothing would be possible in the order of reason. It is via this entirely original research into the thinking that governs us, through a process of reflection brought to us by the Greeks, that we grasp, for example, the importance of the principle of contradiction. Once this principle of contradiction has been discovered, it is on the basis of the principle of contradiction that something can be expanded on and ordered that definitely shows that If contradiction and its principle was nothing but something that was entirely tautological, then tautology would be particularly fruitful, for it is not simply in a few pages that Aristotelian logic is developed. In time, however, the historical fact is that the development of logic is far from moving towards an ontology, a radical standardization of the being that is sensed to be targeted in these most general laws of the necessary mode of apprehending the truth. It tends towards a formalism, i.e., that to which the leader of a school of thought is committed, as being important enough, decisive enough in the orientation that it has given to the whole mode of thinking in our era, which is Bertrand Russell, being to reach the goal of putting everything to do with the critique of operations into the field in which logic and mathematics play out, into a general formalism that is as strict, as economical as possible. In short, the corollary of Russell's efforts, of the injection of Russell's efforts towards going in this very direction in mathematics, leads to the formation of what is called set theory, of which one could characterize the general purport in that what is sought is to reduce the whole field of mathematical endeavour, accumulated throughout centuries of development, and I think no better definition of it can be given than that it is to reduce it to a game of letters. This, then, we must take it into account as a given of the progress of thought, let's say of our era, this era being defined as a certain period in the scientific discourse. In these conditions, what does Bertrand Russell turn to when he focuses on it as a way of defining the proper name? It is something that in itself is worth us taking pause over, because this is what is going to allow us to grasp. We could grasp it another way, and you will see that I will show you that we will grasp it another way. Let's say this implicit element of méconnaissance in a certain position that is effectively found to be the corner into which all the efforts towards a secular elaboration of logic have been pushed. The méconnaissance is properly speaking this one, that without doubt I am kind of giving you from the outset, in that I had to put it out there as a presentational necessity. This méconnaissance, it is precisely the most radical relationship of the thinking subject to the letter. Bertrand Russell sees everything but this, the function of the letter. This is what I hope to be able to give you a sense of and to demonstrate to you. Have confidence and follow me. You are now going to see how we are going to advance. What does he give us as the definition of the proper name? A proper name is, says he, a word for particular in English, a word for designating particular things as such outside of any description. There are two ways of approaching things: to describe them by their qualities, by locating them by their coordinates from a mathematician's point of view, if I want to designate what they are as such. This point, let's put it here for example, it is to the right of the blackboard, about at this height, it is white, and it is this, that and the other. That is a description, Russell tells us. And the ways that they can be designated outside of any description as particular, that is what I'm going to call a proper name. The first proper name for Mr. Russell, I have already made allusion to it in my previous seminars, is the this in English, the this one here. This is the question in English. Here is the demonstrative raised to the level of the proper name. it is no less paradoxical that Mr. Russell calmly goes on to envisage the possibility of calling this very point John. Surely it has to be acknowledged that all the same we have here a sign that perhaps there is something going on that doesn't fit with our experience. For the fact is that we don't often call a geometric point John. Nevertheless, Russell has never recoiled from the most extreme expressions of his thought. It's all the same here that the linguist gets alarmed. Alarmed all the more given that between these two extremities of the Russellian definition, word for particular in English, there is a totally paradoxical consequence that, in keeping with his own logic, Russell tells us that Socrates has no right to be considered by us as a proper name, given that Socrates has not been a particular thing for a long time. I am abridging what Russell says. I am even adding a humorous note, but that is the gist of what he wants to say to us, i.e. that, for us, Socrates was Plato's teacher, the man who drank hemlock, etc. It is an abridged description. Hence it is no longer, as such, what he calls a word for designating a particular thing in its particularity. It is very clear that here we can see that we completely lose the thread of what a consciousness of linguistics gives us, i.e. that if we have to eliminate all the proper names that are included in the notion of a community of names, we will arrive at a kind of impasse, which is precisely against what Gardner tries to counterpoint the properly speaking linguistic perspective as such. What is remarkable is that the linguist, not without merit, not without practical application, and not without ability, from a much more profound experience of the signifier, that it is not for nothing that I have signalled to you that this is someone of whom a part of his hard work unfolds to do with what is a particularly suggestive and rich area of research, which is that of the hieroglyphs, since he is an Egyptologist. He is going, to come round to the counter-formulation that is going to seem, for us, to characterize the function of the proper name. This characterization of the function of the proper name, he is going, in order to elaborate it, to refer to John Stuart Mill and a Greek grammarian of the 2nd century BC who was called Dionysius Thrax. Peculiarly, he is going to encounter through them something that, without ending up with the same paradox as Bertrand Russell, takes into account ways of formulating it that, at first sight, could be seen to be what may be called homonymic. The proper name, idion onoma, is by the way just the translation of what the Greeks brought to the question, and namely this Dionysius Thrax. Idion is opposed to koinon. Is it here that idion gets confused with the particular in the Russellian definition of the term? Certainly not, since it would just as well not be on this that Mr. Gardner would be basing his argument if it was just in order to come to an agreement with his adversary. Unfortunately, he doesn't reach the point of specifying the difference here between the term property, as it could be applied using what distinguishes it in the original Greek point of view, from the paradoxical consequences that a certain formalism ends up at.